Want to read more books but don't have the time? No worries. I've got the perfect solution. Let artificial intelligence do it for you. Welcome to Daily Book Bytes. Deep Dive, the podcast where every day we break down a book in minutes with an AI that thinks it knows everything, and me just trying to keep up. So grab your headphones, sip your coffee, and most importantly, like, share, and subscribe. Ready? Let's dive into today's episode.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take a closer look at all those books that you've got piled up on your nightstand. And today we are going to be taking a deep dive into Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. I mean, it's a classic for a reason, right?
Yeah.
And, you flagged some really interesting excerpts that deal with Boo Radley and Atticus Finch.
You know what's really fascinating is how Lee uses those characters, Boo and Atticus, to kind of explore this idea of childhood innocence, but also, how prejudice can really warp a community.
Mm-hmm.
And you see it all through Scout's eyes, so it just, adds another layer to those themes.
Yeah, for sure. So let's start with Boo Radley. You highlighted the way that Lee describes the Radley place, like it's run down, kind of hidden behind those oak trees.
Yeah.
Almost sounds like a setting from a Southern Gothic novel, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Southern Gothic, it often uses those, decaying settings and even grotesque characters to symbolize, deeper societal issues. And in this case, like the Radley place really represents that, the rot of prejudice and fear that's kind of taken root in Maycomb.
And then there are all those rumors surrounding Boo Radley, like almost mythical, right? Coys and Pecans, the stabbing incident with his father. You even circled that part in your notes. What is it about those stories that stand out to you?
Those rumors are a really great example of how, fear and just gossip can turn a person into a monster in the public imagination. And it also highlights how prejudice often stems from ignorance and a lack of understanding.
It's interesting, though, because even though the children are afraid of Boo initially, they're also really curious about him. They try to, lure him out, dare each other to touch the house. There's this push and pull between fear and fascination.
Definitely. It's like they're both repelled and drawn to this mystery that is Boo Radley. And then you add, those gifts that are left in the knothole of the tree, like the gum, the pennies, even the watch and the knife. It adds another layer of complexity to how they see him.
You circled those gifts, too. So what do you make of those? Is Boo trying to connect, or is it something more sinister?
I mean, that's the beauty of Lee's writing. She leaves it open to interpretation, but those gifts could be seen as Boo's attempt to kind of reach out, express kindness, despite being so ostracized. It challenges the children and us as readers to really question our assumptions about him.
Okay, so then we have Atticus Finch. And, you marked that passage about the mad dog, Tim Johnson, and how that incident kind of changes the children's view of their father. What was it about that scene that struck you?
Atticus initially seems like this, quiet and unassuming lawyer, even a bit boring to Scout and Jem. But then when he takes down that rabid dog with a single shot, it reveals this hidden strength and competence. It's like he becomes a different person in that moment.
And that connects to his decision to defend Tom Robinson, right? You underlined Atticus's, that famous line, the one place where a man ought to get a square deal is in a courtroom. What does that tell us about Atticus?
That line really encapsulates Atticus's belief in justice and the rule of law. It shows that he's not just a good lawyer, but a man of deep principles, and he's willing to stand up for what's right, even when it's unpopular.
He's also a model of courage, too. Not just physically, but morally. You highlighted Atticus's definition of courage. Real courage is when you know you're licked before you begin, but you begin anyway and see it through no matter what. What is it about that definition that speaks to you?
Atticus is saying that true courage isn't about winning or losing. It's about fighting for what you believe in, even when the odds are stacked against you. It's about standing firm in your convictions no matter what the consequences are.
And this ties into that other excerpt that you marked where Atticus tells his sister that he's tired of all the prejudice and hate that he sees in Maycomb. It shows that even Atticus, who seems so strong and unwavering, is affected by, the ugliness around him.
Exactly. It humanizes him. It reminds us that even the most principled individuals aren't immune to the emotional toll of fighting injustice. And it kind of foreshadows the challenges and heartbreak that lie ahead for him and his children as the trial unfolds.
So we've got Boo Radley, shrouded in mystery Atticus, facing this uphill battle against prejudice. Seems like these seemingly separate storylines are setting the stage for something big.
Oh, absolutely. Lee is a master at weaving together these seemingly disparate threads to create a really powerful and ultimately interconnected narrative. As you keep reading, you'll see how those connections unfold in really unexpected and thought-provoking ways.
So we left off with Boo Radley, shrouded in mystery, and Atticus standing firm in his principles as he prepares to defend Tom Robinson. And you mentioned that the trial itself really resonated with you. What was it about that part of the book that stood out to you?
I think the trial is really where, the ugliness of prejudice is just laid bare. Lee doesn't shy away from depicting the racism and hypocrisy that just permeates Macomb's society. I mean, it's uncomfortable to read, but it's also a powerful reminder of the injustices that people face just based on, the color of their skin.
Yeah, you highlighted that scene where Scout and Jem faced taunts and insults from other children because of their father's decision to defend Tom Robinson. I mean, it's just heartbreaking to see them experiencing that kind of hatred at such a young age.
It is. But it also, I think it underscores that insidious nature of prejudice. It just seeps into every corner of society, poisoning even the minds of children. Lee shows how prejudice is learned and passed down through generations.
And Dill, who's visiting for the summer, is so overwhelmed by the injustice of the trial that he breaks down crying in the courtroom. You marked that passage in your notes. What do you think Dill's reaction represents?
I think Dill represents innocence. He's not jaded by the world's cruelty yet, so he reacts with this pure, unfiltered emotion. His tears are a testament to the power of empathy, and they really stand in stark contrast to the indifference and even hostility that's displayed by a lot of the adults in the courtroom.
Yeah. But amidst all that darkness, there are these glimmers of hope. You highlighted the scene where Reverend Sykes leads the black community in standing up for Atticus as he leaves the courtroom, even though the verdict didn't go their way. Right. What do you think that gesture signifies?
Oh, it's a powerful moment of solidarity and a recognition of Atticus's integrity. I mean, even though they lost the case, the black community acknowledges his efforts and sees him as an ally. It shows that even in the face of defeat, there are those who recognize and appreciate those who stand up for what's right.
And then there's Miss Maudie, who provides this consistent source of support for the Finches throughout the trial. You circled her line, Atticus Finch is the same in his house as he is on the public streets. What do you think Lee is trying to convey through Miss Maudie's words?
Well, she's highlighting Atticus's authenticity. He's not putting on a show for the public. His principles are deeply ingrained. She's also kind of offering a counterpoint to the prevailing prejudice in Macomb, showing that not everyone has succumbed to the town's collective fear and hatred.
It's interesting how Lee uses the children's perspective to kind of expose the hypocrisy of the adult world. They observe those contradictions and inconsistencies in their community. They're asking questions that the adults often avoid.
Exactly. And Scout, especially with her bluntness and curiosity, she challenges the status quo. She doesn't understand why things are the way they are, and her questions force those around her to confront their own prejudices.
You also highlighted the scene where Atticus tells Scout and Jem that it's a sin to kill a mockingbird. He explains that mockingbirds don't harm anyone, they just sing beautiful songs. Mm-hmm. How does that idea connect to the broader themes of the book?
Well, the mockingbird becomes a really powerful symbol throughout the novel. It represents innocence and vulnerability. Yeah. Tom Robinson, who is falsely accused and ultimately destroyed by prejudice, he can be seen as a mockingbird. Boo Radley, who is ostracized and misunderstood, he's another example.
So we have these innocent characters who are essentially persecuted for simply existing. It kind of raises the question, how do we define justice and how do we protect the vulnerable from the evils of the world?
That's the central question that Lee explores in To Kill a Mockingbird. And it's not a book with easy answers, but it forces us to confront these issues head on and examine our own beliefs about justice, prejudice, and the responsibility we have to protect the innocent.
And it seems like Lee is using the trial of Tom Robinson as a microcosm of the larger societal issues at play. It's not just about one man's fate. It's about the systemic racism and prejudice that permeates Macomb and, by extension, the wider world.
Right. The trial is a focal point for these issues, but Lee makes it clear that these problems extend far beyond the courtroom. They're deeply embedded in the fabric of society, and they require a collective effort to dismantle.
You also marked the scene where Bob Ewell, who falsely accused Tom Robinson of rape, confronts Atticus and spits in his face. What do you think that act represents?
I mean, Bob Ewell embodies the darkest impulses of prejudice and hatred. His actions are this visceral display of the danger that people like Atticus face when they challenge the established order. It also kind of foreshadows the looming threat that Bob Ewell poses to Atticus and his family.
It's clear that the tension and the conflict are escalating, and I'm sure you're eager to see how it all plays out. But before we dive into the final part of the book, I want to pause for a moment and ask you, what's your biggest takeaway so far? What's resonating with you the most? So we were talking about how that trial, with Tom Robinson just brought to light all that prejudice and hypocrisy that was in Macomb. And It's obvious that everything that happened during that trial really stirred up a lot of anger and resentment, especially from Bob Ewell. And you mark that passage where he attacks Jem and Scout, and we talk about a chilling turn of events.
Yeah, it's terrifying because it shows you how dangerous that prejudice can be. Like Bob Ewell is full of hatred and he wants revenge, so he lashes out at, Atticus's kids, the most vulnerable people. It just shows how prejudice goes from, hateful words to violent actions.
Then get this, Boo Radley, the recluse that everybody was afraid of. He comes out of the shadows to protect the children. You circled that part in your notes. What were you thinking when you read that for the first time?
I thought it was powerful. Like, it was Boo Radley's redemption. The immunity made him an outcast and they demonized him. But then he becomes the hero, and it just proves that looks can be deceiving and that even people who are marginalized can be brave and compassionate.
It makes you rethink all those, ideas we get about people based on what we hear or because we're scared.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder how many Boo Radleys are out there, people who are just misunderstood.
Oh, for sure. And it makes you think about empathy and understanding. It reminds us to look deeper than the surface and see the good in everyone, even if they seem different or maybe a little scary.
That decision to protect Boo Radley by saying that Bob Ewell fell on his own knife. That's a tough one.
Yeah.
You said you really struggled with that part. Why is it so difficult, and how did it make you feel?
It's one of those classic ethical dilemmas. On the one hand, Boo Radley saved those kids' lives, and putting him through a trial could do more harm than good. He's already been through so much.
But then there's the truth and accountability. Is it ever right to hide the truth, even if you're trying to do the right thing? And if you protect Boo like that, does it mean that justice wasn't served?
It's a question that Lee doesn't really answer. She leaves it up to the reader to figure out those complicated issues. It's really amazing how her writing can make you think about stuff like that.
Atticus, who's always been about justice and doing things by the book, he goes along with the sheriff's decision. What do you think that tells us about him?
It shows that even people with the strongest principles have to compromise sometimes when things are hard. Atticus realizes that sometimes you have to bend the rules to protect innocent people. He's not all about the law. He's also compassionate, and he gets that life is complicated.
That ending with Scout walking Boo Radley home and then standing on his porch and seeing the world the way he sees it, it's so powerful. You said that passage was really meaningful to you. What was it about that scene that stood out?
It's a beautiful moment, She sees the world through Boo Radley's eyes, and she finally understands that he's not a monster, but just a person who needs kindness and compassion. It shows how powerful it can be to see things from someone else's perspective, and how it can change your whole understanding of them.
And it brings the story full circle, right? Like from when the kids were scared of Boo and curious about him to Scout, showing empathy for him. It's like they've come such a long way.
It really shows you how strong human connection can be and how important it is to challenge our own biases and prejudices. To Kill a Mockingbird is a book that stays with you. It makes you ask tough questions, and it challenges your beliefs, and it gives you hope that, if we have empathy and understanding, we can make the world a better place.
Well, there you have it.
Yeah.
Our deep dive into To Kill a Mockingbird has come to an end. We've uncovered the mysteries of Boo Radley and seen the unwavering integrity of Atticus Finch. We've faced the ugliness of prejudice and the enduring power of empathy.
This was just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to this book. We want you to keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep discovering new things every time you read it. It's a classic for a reason.
Remember, every book is like a door to a new world, new ideas and new ways of seeing ourselves and the world around us. So keep reading and join us next time for another deep dive into a captivating subject. Until then, happy reading.
And that's a wrap for today's episode. But before you go, I want to hear from you. What did you think of today's book? Drop a comment below, and let's keep the conversation going. And hey, if you enjoyed this, make sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss a new episode. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. See you in the next one, same time, same place. Until then, happy reading.